Yesterday, I had the pleasure of having Alejandro Mayorkas, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, before us in the Judiciary Committee. I reminded the Secretary that about 15 months ago, he appeared before the Judiciary Committee. And when he did so, I asked him point blank, Mr. Secretary, do you have, in your job as the Secretary, operational control of the border? He said, I do. I said, wait, you have operational control of the border? And I pulled up the statute, the Secure Fence Act, which requires this country and the Secretary carrying out his job to maintain operational control. I pulled up a second board with a statute definition about what is operational control. And it means you do not allow anybody to come across the border and into our country without papers and knowing who they are. You don't allow illegal trafficking. You don't allow narcotics to come across. You have operational control of the border. I put all that up. I said, are you sure you have operational control of the border? The Secretary said, I do. Pushed on him multiple times. Funny enough, a little bit later, in a different hearing, later this year, over in the Senate, the Secretary changed his tune. He said, well, by that definition under the Secure Fence Act, I don't use that one. He said, under that definition, nobody's ever had operational control. The fact is, the Secretary wants the American people to believe that our country is in charge of our border when anybody with eyes knows that it is the cartels who have operational control of our border, that they are wide open and lawless, and Americans are dying as a result from fentanyl poisonings, and migrants are dying as a result in the false name of compassion while my Democratic colleagues pat themselves on the back while 53 people roast in a tractor trailer in San Antonio, which I represent. Or the little girls that are sold into the sex trafficking trade, being exposed in the Sound of Freedom, making tens of billions of dollars, moving human beings for profit. That's what is happening, and my Democratic colleagues don't care, and the Secretary of Homeland Security doesn't care, and the Secretary of Homeland Security lied in front of me, in front of the entire Judiciary Committee, in front of all America, by saying that he has operational control of the border when faced with the statute, knowing what it means and knowing full well that he does not, we do not, our country does not. Governor Abbott was being criticized on the floor today by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle because he's putting up barriers. He's putting Texas DPS, Department of Public Safety, troopers down on the Rio Grande. He's deploying barriers in the middle of the Rio Grande. He's being criticized for being heartless. Who is it that's heartless? Those that want the rule of law enforced and to tell the world that you don't flood our borders in a way that's going to empower cartels and endanger yourself? Or is it heartless to allow all of those people to get sold into the sex trafficking trade, die in the Texas heat, get abused, get used by cartels? Like the federal judge in Texas who upward departed a few weeks ago from the penalties under our statutes and the sentencing guidelines because he ran across a case where the cartels had a stash house in Fort Worth, Texas. A man illegally here, a father, was in Baltimore, Maryland, and he was being told by the cartels his daughter would be raped if he didn't pay $23,000. That is happening every day in our country, every single day, in the supposed greatest country on the face of the earth and in history. We stand here, 435 of us, in front of that flag, and that flag is supposed to mean something. And it sure as hell doesn't mean anything if little girls are getting raped right here in D.C., up the road in Baltimore, in Houston, in San Antonio, in Laredo, in Fort Worth. We have evidence it's happening every day. And we don't do anything about it, except pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, well, we can just interpret parole and interpret asylum laws and just tell the world, come on up through Mexico. But don't mind the fact that thousands of you are going to die. You're going to get used by the cartels. You're going to pay millions of dollars, and your little girls are going to get exploited. Sound of freedom indeed. We should be ashamed of ourselves. And by the way, that goes for Republicans and Democrats, because it has happened under both of our watches for far too long.